Tonight, we start with news that over 18 million Americans have been waiting on, and the Social Security Administration just made it official. Not a rumor, not a leak, a confirmed, documented update straight from the agency itself. And what makes this moment matter isn't just the numbers, it's the timing. Because right now, in the middle of 2026, millions of SSI and SSDI recipients are dealing with grocery bills that haven't come down, rent that keeps climbing, and a federal benefit system that doesn't always explain itself clearly or quickly enough. So when SSA finally speaks with specificity, when they release actual dates, actual figures, and actual guidance, it cuts through an enormous amount of noise. Tonight, we break all of it down. What's confirmed, what changed, what you need to do before June 1st, and what you absolutely need to watch out for. Stay with us, because this one affects your household directly. For most of early 2026, the benefits community has been living under a cloud of uncertainty. Budget negotiations in Washington, proposed changes to federal discretionary spending, and a flood of misinformation across social media created an environment where even longtime recipients weren't sure what to expect month to month. And SSA, perhaps because of internal workload pressures, perhaps because of ongoing staffing limitations, was slower than usual to issue its standard forward-looking communications, the routine updates that advocates and benefits counselors rely on to plan client outreach. Delayed. The FAQ refreshes on SSA's website that usually happen ahead of major payment cycles, missing for weeks. The Federal Register language that typically signals upcoming disbursement adjustments, quiet in a way that felt unusual to people who monitor these things professionally. Policy watchers who have spent years tracking SSA communications know that silence before a major payment cycle can mean one of two things. Either nothing is changing and the agency simply hasn't prioritized outreach, or something is shifting and they're waiting until the details are locked before saying anything publicly. This time, it turned out to be the second one. And what shifted matters, because it affects how much money arrives, when it arrives, and for which recipients it looks different than it did last year. Let's get into what was actually announced, because this is where clarity matters most. SSA has confirmed that June 2026 payments will proceed on the standard federal schedule, with one important calendar note that every SSI recipient needs to hear right now. June 1st, 2026 falls on a Monday. That means SSI payments, which are typically issued on the 1st of each month, will go out as scheduled on June 1st without any weekend adjustment this cycle. For SSDI recipients, payments continue to follow the birth date schedule that SSA has used for years. But for 2026, here are the confirmed June dates you need to mark on your calendar right now. If your birthday falls between the 1st and the 10th of any month, your June SSDI payment will arrive on Wednesday, June 10th. If your birthday falls between the 11th and the 20th, your payment arrives on Wednesday, June 17th. And if your birthday falls between the 21st and the 31st, your June payment arrives on Wednesday, June 24th. For the smaller group of recipients who began receiving SSDI benefits before May 1997, SSA still processes those payments on the 3rd of each month, which puts June's payment on Tuesday, June 3rd. Write those dates down, put them in your phone, because one of the most common sources of panic in the benefits community happens when a payment doesn't arrive on the day someone assumed it would, often because they had the wrong date in mind to begin with. Now let's talk about what the money actually looks like in 2026. The Social Security Administration applied a cost of living adjustment of 2.5% for 2025. Heading into 2026, the COLA environment has continued to be shaped by persistent inflation in housing, healthcare, and food, the three categories that hit SSI and SSDI recipients hardest because they represent the largest share of a fixed income budget. For 2026, the maximum federal SSI benefit for an eligible individual sits at approximately $967 per month at baseline, though ongoing policy discussions in the first quarter of 2026 have focused on whether that figure adequately reflects real cost of living increases in high-cost states. For SSDI, the picture varies more significantly by recipient, because SSDI is calculated based on your individual earnings history and how long you paid into the Social Security system before your disability began. The average SSDI payment in 2026 is hovering around $1,580 per month, while recipients with strong, consistent long-term earnings histories can qualify for significantly more. Here is where the headline figure that's been circulating comes from, and here is what it actually means. Some recipients, particularly those who receive both SSI and state supplemental payments, or those whose SSDI calculation reflects decades of substantial earnings, can see combined monthly benefit totals that approach or exceed $2,000. States like California, New York, and Massachusetts add meaningful state supplements on top of the federal SSI base. When you add federal SSI, state supplements, and in some cases concurrent SSDI benefits together, the total monthly income for certain recipients does reach that range. But this is not a new check being handed out universally. This is the result of the existing benefit structure, calculated correctly for each individual recipient based on their own history and circumstances. That distinction matters enormously, because when that nuance disappears, it creates confusion, false expectations, and real harm to people who make financial decisions based on inaccurate information. Let's slow down here and make this as practical as possible. If you are an SSI recipient living alone in a state without a supplement program, your June 2026 payment is approximately $967. That money needs to cover rent, food, utilities, transportation, and any out-of-pocket healthcare costs not covered by Medicaid. If you are an SSI recipient in California, which runs one of the most robust state supplement programs in the country, your combined SSI and state supplement could put your total monthly income closer to $1,100 to $1,200 before any additional household income is factored in. If you receive SSDI based on a strong work history, your June payment could range from the low end of roughly $800 for someone with limited work history to well above $2,000 for someone who spent 30 or 40 years paying into Social Security at middle or higher income levels. If you are a concurrent beneficiary, meaning you receive both SSI and SSDI simultaneously, your situation is more complex. SSA calculates your SSDI payment first, then offsets your SSI benefit by that amount, minus a small earned income exclusion. The combined total is often less than people expect, which is why working with a benefits counselor if you're in this category is genuinely valuable. And if you are the spouse or dependent of an SSDI recipient, auxiliary benefits may also be in play for your household, though those are calculated separately and are beyond what many people think to ask about. The point here is simple. Your June 2026 payment amount is specific to you. It is not a flat check. It is not a universal stimulus. It is a benefit calculated based on your individual record. And it is worth taking the time to understand exactly what your record says. Here's something that the payment schedules and dollar amounts don't fully capture, and it's worth sitting with for a moment. The emotional reality for many SSI and SSDI recipients heading into the summer of 2026 is one of compounding exhaustion. These are people who spent months in 2025 navigating a political environment where federal benefit programs were discussed in budget negotiations as line items to be reduced, restructured, or means tested in ways that would have fundamentally changed who qualifies and for how much. None of those changes ultimately materialized for June 2026 payments. The benefit structure remains intact for this cycle. But the anxiety that those discussions created, the sleepless nights, the frantic phone calls to Social Security field offices, the desperate searches for accurate information online, that anxiety doesn't simply dissolve when the payment posts to a bank account. It lingers. It shapes how people plan. It makes them less likely to spend on things they genuinely need because they're not sure whether next month's check will look the same. Disability advocates working directly with recipients describe this as a kind of chronic financial stress that compounds the physical and medical challenges their clients are already managing. And they are clear that better, earlier, more consistent communication from SSA would meaningfully reduce that burden. Tonight's confirmation helps, but the advocates we spoke with are uniform in saying that one good communication cycle does not substitute for the kind of systemic improvement in SSA outreach that this population deserves. We need to spend real time here, because this is the part of the story that directly costs people money. Reports from the Federal Trade Commission covering the first quarter of 2026 show that Social Security impersonation scams remain among the top 3 fraud categories targeting American consumers, and they are disproportionately concentrated among elderly recipients and individuals with disabilities. The tactics have become more sophisticated. Callers now reference specific payment amounts, specific deposit dates, and in some cases specific partial Social Security numbers obtained through data breaches, making the calls sound credible in ways that earlier, cruder scams did not. Text message scams have surged, with messages that visually mimic SSA's official communication style, directing recipients to click links that harvest banking credentials. Fake websites with URLs designed to look like SSA.gov at a quick glance are appearing with increasing frequency in search results around high-interest payment months. And June is consistently one of those months. Here is what SSA will never do. They will never call you to ask for your banking information. They will never tell you that you need to pay a fee to receive your benefit. They will never ask you to verify your Social Security number over the phone in an unsolicited call. And they will never threaten to suspend your payments unless you act immediately. If any of those things happen, hang up, block the number, report the contact to the FTC at reportfraud.ftc.gov, and to SSA's Office of Inspector General at oig.ssa.gov. Your June payment is not in jeopardy, but it could become so if someone gains access to your banking information. The protection of that payment starts with knowing that the threat is real and that you have every right to hang up on anyone creating pressure around your benefits. It is worth remembering how different this moment looks compared to where this program stood 15 years ago. SSI recipients spent years with benefit levels that hadn't been meaningfully adjusted for inflation in ways that kept pace with actual expenses. The gap between what the federal benefit provided and what it actually cost to survive widened slowly and persistently, and for many recipients, it never fully closed. SSDI processing times for initial claims were regularly running 18 months or longer. People who became disabled and applied for the benefits they had paid into for decades were waiting a year and a half, sometimes longer, before receiving a first payment. Many lost housing. Many exhausted savings. Many relied entirely on family members during that period. The field office network that serves walk-in recipients shrank significantly over the previous decade. Appointment availability tightened. Phone hold times at the national 800 number stretched to hours. Today, those underlying structural pressures haven't disappeared. But June 2026 payments are going out on time, at levels that at least partially reflect the cost of living environment recipients are actually navigating, with a communication infrastructure that, on this cycle at least, got the information out before the panic set in. That is progress. It is not enough, but it is progress worth naming. What most recipients don't see, and what shapes every payment cycle whether anyone talks about it or not, is the political environment that surrounds these programs in Washington. Heading into the second half of 2026, SSI and SSDI sit at the intersection of several competing pressures. Disability rights advocacy groups are pushing aggressively for an increase to the federal SSI benefit level, arguing that the current maximum for an individual is inadequate and that the asset limits, which haven't been updated in decades, effectively trap recipients in poverty by penalizing any effort to save. Budget-focused caucuses in Congress continue to identify disability program expenditures as targets for long-term cost reduction, usually framed around reducing fraud and improving program integrity, but with real implications for recipient access. Senior advocacy organizations are watching COLA projections for 2027 closely, because if inflation readings in the second half of 2026 come in lower than expected, next year's adjustment could be minimal in ways that would sting given where prices actually are. And state governments running supplement programs are making their own calculations about how much they can sustain, with some states facing budget pressures that put those supplements at risk. Every June payment goes out inside this political environment. Recipients feel the stability or the instability of that environment in their monthly benefit, even when no one in Washington announces that anything has changed. SSA's June 2026 communication, distributed through its website, partner agencies, and field offices, was built around one central message: payments are on schedule, amounts reflect the current benefit structure, and recipients should verify their account information and be alert to fraud. That sounds simple, and in some ways it is. But what it represents? An agency choosing proactive communication over silence, choosing plain language over bureaucratic abstraction, choosing to address the misinformation environment directly rather than ignoring it. That is meaningful. Officials noted that payment schedules are consistent with federal statute and that no policy changes are currently in effect that would alter benefit amounts for June 2026 disbursements. That is the agency's measured way of saying, the checks are coming, the amounts are correct, and anyone telling you otherwise is not telling you the truth. Across the country this week, advocates working directly with SSI and SSDI recipients have been fielding calls and questions at a pace that tells its own story. A benefits counselor in Cleveland described her caseload this spring as the most anxious she has seen in years, not because anything had actually changed, but because so many of her clients were convinced something had. A Social Security field office manager in Phoenix noted that walk-in traffic in April and May of 2026 was running well above typical levels, with most visitors coming in not to apply for new benefits, but simply to confirm that their existing benefits were still active. A disability rights attorney in Atlanta described receiving calls from clients asking whether a viral social media post claiming that SSDI was being terminated for people under 60 was real. It was not. It has never been real. But it was shared hundreds of thousands of times before platforms began flagging it. These are the human costs of an information environment where SSA's official communications are often slower, quieter, and harder to find than the misinformation competing against them. The June 2026 payment confirmation helps reset that balance, but only if recipients actually see it, which is exactly why this conversation matters. Let's make this section the most practical 2 minutes of everything you've heard tonight. Number 1. Log into your My Social Security account at ssa.gov and confirm that your direct deposit information is accurate and current. A closed account, a changed bank, or a routing number that was updated and never reported to SSA is the single most common reason a payment is delayed or returned. This takes 5 minutes. Do it today. Number 2. Know your payment date for June based on the schedule we outlined earlier, and do not assume your payment will arrive on a day different from the one SSA has published. If June 10th, 17th, or 24th is your date, that is when to expect it. Not June 1st, not June 3rd, unless those dates specifically apply to your benefit category. Number 3. Do not act on any payment-related communication that did not come directly from ssa.gov or from a letter mailed to your address on file with SSA. Phone calls, text messages, emails, and social media posts claiming to offer early payment access, benefit verification services, or urgent account updates are fraud. Every one of them. Report and ignore. These 3 steps will not guarantee a perfect June, but they will eliminate the most common, most preventable problems that delay payments and cost recipients money they cannot afford to lose. Advocates are now focused on 3 broader questions that will shape the second half of 2026 for SSI and SSDI recipients. The first is whether Congress will advance any legislation to update the SSI asset limits, currently set at $2,000 for individuals and $3,000 for couples, levels that have not changed since 1989, and that force recipients to remain in financial precarity as a condition of their eligibility. The second is what inflation readings in July and October will signal about the 2027 COLA, because those 2 months carry the most weight in SSA's calculation, and the difference between a 2% and a 3.5% adjustment is real money for people living on fixed incomes. The third is how SSA's ongoing staffing and technology modernization efforts will affect processing times and communication quality in the second half of the year, particularly for people filing new claims, appealing denials, or navigating a change in their circumstances. Today, recipients receive something concrete and actionable: confirmed payment dates and verified benefit information for June 2026. That is the floor of what SSA owes the people it serves. The ceiling, a system that proactively reaches every recipient with accurate information in time to be useful, is still being built. What tonight's coverage ultimately reflects is a test, not of any individual payment, but of whether a system designed to provide stability can actually communicate stability to the people who need it most. SSA wants a June 2026 disbursement cycle that runs cleanly, reaches every eligible recipient on time, and doesn't get derailed by fraud, misinformation, or preventable administrative errors. Recipients want exactly the same thing. They want their payment on the date it's supposed to arrive, in the amount they're entitled to, in the account they specified, without drama, without panic, and without a phone call from someone pretending to be from the government. Advocates want the communication that makes that outcome possible to be standard, not exceptional, and the broader public interest, regardless of political affiliation, is served when 18 million Americans heading into summer have financial stability that lets them focus on their health, their families, and their lives. As of tonight, SSA's payment processing systems show June disbursements queued and on track. Benefits counselors report that the volume of misinformation-driven panic calls has begun to decline as accurate information spreads, a sign that proactive communication, even when delayed, does eventually do its work. SSA's Office of Inspector General has confirmed it is actively investigating multiple fraud rings operating SSA impersonation schemes targeting recipients in at least 14 states. And for the recipients themselves, the seniors who have paid into this system for decades, the workers whose disabilities ended careers they were proud of, the individuals navigating daily life on incomes that leave almost no margin for error. The message tonight is straightforward. Your June 2026 payment is coming. It is funded. It is scheduled. And you have every right to receive it on time, in full, without interference from anyone who would try to take it from you. As June unfolds, additional details will emerge: state supplement payment dates, individual case adjustments, and the latest on SSA's processing timelines for pending claims. But what tonight established is that the foundation is solid for this cycle. SSA communicated early enough to be useful. The dates are confirmed. The benefit structure is intact. And recipients who take the 3 practical steps we outlined have done everything within their control to ensure a smooth payment experience. What comes next in the broader story, the policy debates, the COLA calculations, the ongoing fight to modernize SSA's infrastructure, will continue to unfold in the months ahead. But for June 2026, this much is true. The information is out, the schedule is real, and you no longer have to wonder. Tonight, for the first time in a cycle that had been generating more anxiety than clarity, the picture is clear. The dates are published, the amounts are confirmed, the fraud warnings are on record. And when recipients have that information, accurate, early, and presented in plain language, the noise that bad actors depend on loses its power. Because tonight, every SSI and SSDI recipient who watch this has something no scammer can manufacture and no misleading post can take away. The truth about when your payment is coming, the truth about what it will be, and the truth about how to protect it. This story will keep moving. Policy will keep evolving. And we will be here every step of the way, making sure the information that reaches you is accurate, current, and genuinely useful, because that is what you deserve. And tonight, that is exactly what we delivered.